Hey everyone, Mr. Wineland here with Chapter 14, Section 3. We're going to go through it real quick. We've been talking about the Great Depression and what it did to the United States during this time frame. Obviously, Herbert Hoover was in a situation where he wasn't prepared for, and it makes sense that a lot of presidents, when they would be faced with a challenge like this, it's very hard to figure out what to do. Number 10 is right here in the blue, by the way, down here. And so when the stock market crashed back in October 1929, Herbert Hoover really tried to reassure people, give confidence, be like, everything's fine, everything's okay, everything's all right. And sometimes in those moments, leaders want to do what's, best, obviously, for them. They want to make sure that they, they want to keep their position, but they feel the best way to give confidence is by basically kind of reassuring people things are going to be okay. It's all right. There's any lack of confidence in the economic future is foolish, he declared. But what the thing is that really needs to happen is you need to be truthful and understandable, like what's really going on. So, in his view, the important thing was kind of being optimistic, keeping people, on track. But Americans believe the depression was, and some people did think that the depression was a normal part cycle of the economy. But really, what's going to see happening is rapid growth. Even though they thought this was part of natural growth, what they're going to find out is that it's not really a part of the economy and the cycle. The best course in a slump, many experts believe, was to do nothing, let the economy fix itself. And a lot of times that's not true. In a recession, there are times you do take some action, but you don't take as much action, and you kind of let the economy correct itself. But what you're seeing with the depression is that no, direct relief has to be taken. And what we've learned in these past recessions, going back to 2008, things had to be done. Things had to be passed. You had to pass bills going into that 2009 with the presidency. You had to pass an economic bill to bail out these banks. Now, you didn't have to give so much to the banks. You could have done more for housing and things like that, but you had to do something. And then now with the COVID relief, it's taking a lot more government resources. We're seeing this more in a bigger than the 2008, 2009 type crisis. And you're seeing that this is kind of more closer to the Great Depression, which required more relief. Problem is, Hoover's not going to do that. Like a lot of Americans, Hoover believed that one of government's chief functions was to foster cooperation between competing groups and interest society. His idea was to really help the businesses and labor. Whenever time they were in conflict, he wanted to find a solution to kind of keep everybody in gear there. He was more trying to incorporate cooperation, encourage cooperation with the government, its role. But on the other hand, a lot of Americans also valued rugged individualism, the idea that somebody can make their way through this efforts, and see that it's not really depend on the government. So what you're seeing happening in this time is a lot of pride. The Hoover's pride is getting in the way, as well as American pride is getting in the way. Neither side can come together to go, okay, we've got a real problem here. We need to just kind of let go of this pride, realize we need some assistance, we need some help. But eventually you're going to see that happen. So Hoover really opposed federal welfare or direct relief to the needy. He felt like, again, let's focus on charities, organizations that can help these individuals. The problem is, and as we probably learned from the previous section, is that a lot of these charities and organizations can do so much. The federal government should have done direct relief measures. But what you see is a lot of the bureaucracy is like, well, it's too expensive. We shouldn't do this. It's going to affect or would stifle individual liberties. But really, it wouldn't have. So what we see is going to happen is that when the Depression took hold, moral fiber wasn't what the people were worried about. Hoover's response shocked and frustrated a lot of the suffering Americans who basically wanted that direct relief. Private charities is right here for number 12. So Hoover's political philosophy was very conservative. He was a conservative of not getting too involved with the government or having the government be too big and to take too much. He wanted to protect the stock market. He was talking about protecting businesses, the banking. He urged work together to find solutions on the economic woes so things don't get worse. For example, he asked employers to cut wages, not workers. But you're still going to see people, even with their wages cut, not have enough to buy food. The people were even already struggling, that is, when there was no depression. Even before that, they were struggling just to even get by. So we see that organizations and charities were kind of leaned on to help support the poor. But a lot of these steps that Hoover tried to take to avoid direct relief didn't really help. A year after the crash, you see the economy was shrinking. It was not growing. Unemployment was rising. More companies went out of business. Soup kitchens were struggling. It was just hard. And then shanty towns started to pop up in cities. One project that Hoover approved to make a difference was on Secretary of Commerce. While Secretary of Commerce was approving a dam for the Colorado River. Really kind of this federal intervention, which had the federal government finance the dam's construction by using profits from sales of the electric power that the dam would generate. He also helped arrange agreements of water rights among 7 states around the Colorado River Basin: Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming. Number 11 is Boulder Dam. By the time the massive project was actually won congressional approval in 1928, it was a part of a $700 million public works program, which the good thing is this thing got approved before the Great Depression really happened. And Hoover had been elected to the White House in the election in 1928. By the fall of 1929, 1 year into his presidency, they were able to authorize this construction of the dam. It was a big, massive project. 726 feet high, 1,244 feet long, the world's tallest dam and the second largest, providing electric and flood water. And the dam also provided a regular water supply, which enabled the growth of California's massive agricultural economy. So it not only helped with electricity power, using the water to power electricity, but it also provided for water source. And today it still is a big source for Los Angeles and Las Vegas for providing water as well as lights. Number 13 is the Democrats. So as the country is still struggling and having difficulty to bounce back, and Hoover not doing direct relief, this is going to open up the door for the Democrats to take back Congress in 1930. We're seeing that the anti-Hoover sentiments to win more seats in Congress. Don't worry, I'm yawning. The Republicans lost control of the House of Representatives and saw that their majority in the Senate dwindled to 1 vote. As Americans grew more and more frustrated by the Depression, they expressed their anger in many ways. And we see farmers stung by low crop prices burn their corn and wheat, and as well as dump their milk. And we see this happening as well in this COVID era. A lot of times what ended up happening is more and more people were forced inside their home. The supply was too much to meet the demand. And so we saw a lot of milk farms over this springtime during the lockdown that started to dump milk because they couldn't sell it. There's no use for it. A number blocked roads to prevent food from getting to the market. Hoping that food shortages would raise prices. Also used force to prevent authorities from foreclosing on farms. By 1930, we see people were calling the shantytowns in America Hoovervilles. So we're starting to see that this was a direct slap to the face at the president's policies. Basically, we see that more and more things are named after Herbert Hoover, not in a good way. So shantytowns become Hoovervilles. Homeless people are called newspapers that they use to wrap themselves in as Hoover blankets. Empty pockets turned inside out as Hoover flags. A lot of Americans once held him as a great humanitarian prior to this, but now they viewed him as more cold and heartless because he would not open up the economic window. And then ultimately, despite the criticism, we see Hoover continues to move forward, move on, but Americans are going hungry and they're starting to blame him more and more. And so as the Depression is deepening and getting worse, President Hoover is starting to soften up for more government support. We see that in Hoover's view, the Boulder Dam was the model for the federal government to encourage cooperation. So his attempts to relieve the Depression involved negotiating agreements with private entities, again, reflecting small governments, not bigger governments. He did not want to get more direct relief in. He's again going into debt. He was not in favor of. But the thing is, it's okay. I think Mitt Romney said here recently, it's like this: if you're going to go in debt, this is the time to go in debt. When people need assistance, when people need help, and that's something that Hoover really needed to hear at this point in time. But I guess he was hearing, he just wasn't listening. He backed what is called the Federal Farm Board, an organization of farm cooperatives. The Farm Board was intended to raise crop prices by helping members to buy crops to keep them off the market temporarily until the prices rose. In addition, Hoover tried to prop up the banking system by persuading the nation's largest banks to establish the National Credit Corporation. This organization loaned money to smaller banks, which helped stay off of bankruptcy. By the late 1931, we see, and by the way, definition for Federal Home Loan Bank Act is right here. We see by late 1931, many people are starting to see the economy fail around them. We see that the president election is looming, and Hoover is in trouble because he appealed to Congress to pass a series of measures to reform banking, provide mortgage relief, funnel more money into business investments. We see in 1932, Hoover is able to sign into law the Federal Home Loan Bank Act, which lowered mortgage rates for homeowners and allowed farmers to refinance their farm loans and foreclosure. But we're seeing it was not until Hoover's time in office was over that Congress would pass the Glass-Steagall Banking Act, which separated the investment from commercial banking, and would Congress hope to prevent another crash. But so we see that certain actions are a little bit too late at this point. We see the RFC, your definition of Reconstruction Finance Corporation is here in blue. So his biggest ambition was the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, approved by Congress in January of 1932. It authorized up to $2 billion for emergency financing for banking, life insurance companies, railroads, other large businesses. He thought this money would trickle from the big businesses down to the lower people. We had some growth, add wages, but a lot of that money, I think, just went to pay off debts, and unfortunately, it didn't save a lot of businesses. Many cities questioned its approach. Again, no direct relief, and so many hungry people, were waiting for opportunities, and their tables were just barren. In the first 5 months of operation, the RFC loaned more than $805 million to large corporations. And by the way, I meant $2 billion, not $2 million. But anyway, but these businesses failed. And we see the RFC was an example of just a little bit too late, not enough at the right time. And bonus army is right here in blue. So we see that things are just not building up. Hoover is trying, but, he's not going big. He wants to stay small, and that's problematic. And even though he's trying to do what's best for his principles, by his principles, he's not doing what's right or doing what's right for the American people. He's putting his principles above the American people, and that's a problem. And that's starting to wear on the American people, and he's starting to lose confidence. The American people are starting to lose confidence in Hoover. And so an event in 1932, which is going to cause even more negative sentiment towards Hoover, and it's going to eventually cost him the presidency. And we see this happen in 1932 when the 10,000, 20,000 World War I veterans arrive in Washington, D.C. to protest for a bill. They called themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force, or the Bonus Army. Basically what happened, and by the way, number 14 is World War I veterans. Walter Waters was an unemployed cannery worker from Oregon who led the Bonus Army. They wanted to support a bill on Congress, which was the Patman Bill, because Congress, after World War I, had passed basically a bonus for anyone who served in World War I. They was supposed to be paid out. All of it was supposed to be paid out by 1946. Well, they hadn't done it already. So the Patent Bill would be able to get them that bonus now, which would help benefit the economy. So these men showed up to Congress in hopes that they would get this bonus. And the Patman believed that the money, an average of $500 per soldier, should have been paid immediately. And so we see they go to protest. And at first, Hoover thought that the bonus marchers were communists and persons with criminal records, which that was not a good start to welcoming the bonus army. He ended up fixing that by, even though he opposed legislation, he still respected the marchers and the right to peaceful assembly. He ended up providing food and supplies to kind of in the shanty towns in the capital, outside of the capital, there on the mall. And to try and win them back over a little bit, kind of gain some points. But once on June 17th, when Senate voted down the Patman bill, Hoover then told the marchers to go away. But 2,000 stayed, hoping to talk to the president, but refusing to budge. And so then number 15 is Douglas MacArthur. You see Hoover just basically just was tired of it. He wanted them out, and he became very. He saw that the anger group could become. He was worried that they would become violent, and so Hoover decided that the bonus army should be disbanded. And so on July 28th, a force of 1,000 soldiers led by General Douglas MacArthur, and also future president at that, eventually to become president would be Major Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was with MacArthur, would kick out the veterans. A government official watching from nearby the office recalled what happened next. And in the course of the operation, the infantry gassed more than 1,000 people, including an 11-month-old baby who died, and then an 8-year-old boy who was partially blind. And this was bad press. 2 people were shot, many were injured, and most Americans were stunned and outraged what happened. This would ultimately, along with an economic downturn, this would ultimately deal ineffectively for Hoover's image, and ultimately would seal his political fate. And the thing is had Hoover given a little bit more direct relief to the people, and obviously would have not pushed MacArthur into this situation to kick out these veterans, maybe he would have gained enough points to win re-election. But the bonus army incident just really hurt his chances to win presidency. And we'll learn more about this in chapter 15 when we get into that about FDR. All right. See ya.